Chapter 6. On their way home, Emily tried to figure out how to have more privacy with Chris that night. As much as she loved her sister, and as many double dates as they'd gone on in high school, it just didn't feel right to be kissing Chris goodnight with her sister right there. Maybe she could hang back in the truck while Matt and Brittany went to the door. Chris must have been thinking the same thing she was, because when he pulled up in front of their apartment, he said, "Wait a minute, Emily. I want to ask you something." As soon as the other two were out of the truck and heading to the door, she moved across the seat to him and into his arms. His hands went to her back and under her shirt, caressing her bare skin. She sighed contentedly. "I've been waiting for that." He laughed. "I did have a question I wanted to ask you, but the kiss was necessary." She frowned at him. "What did you want to ask?" "I'm having a small birthday party for my mother at our ranch next week on Friday night. If you don't have plans, I was hoping you'd be my date." She looked at him, frowning. "You want me to meet your mother?" "I'm not sure I can do that." He grinned. "She's not scary. Please. I'll pick you up." She pulled her planner from her purse, looking through it. "I'm working until 5 on Friday." "What time is the party?" 7. "So you could come." "Is it going to be dressy?" He shrugged. "Yeah, you'll want to wear a skirt or a dress." "Like a black cocktail dress?" He really wasn't sure what women wore to the things, but he would wear his black suit. She frowned. "I think Stephanie has something I could borrow." "You mean you don't always all dress identically?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "We only do that on stage or for public appearances. We really are our own people most of the time." She frowned for a minute before nodding. "She's not going to tell me I have to marry you and have your babies, is she?" "Oh, she might, but probably not." He shrugged. "She's weird about me marrying, so it's entirely possible." And he knew deep down that his mother would love her music but not necessarily want him to date her. What his mother wanted didn't really matter, though. "All right, I'll do it. But you will need to pick me up." "No problem." "Would 6 be too early?" She bit her lip but shook her head. "I think that'll work. I'll have to hurry, but I can do that." He leaned down and kissed her once more. "Good. I want you to see my ranch and be a part of my life." She worried for a moment that he was going too quickly for her, but she felt strongly enough about him that she didn't mind. "Not at all. You'll have to meet my parents eventually, too, but not this week." He smiled, brushing his lips across hers as he opened the door. "Let's get you to your apartment. Rodeo days are exhausting." "I'm excited, though. I never dreamed we'd sell as many CDs as we have. And we've got a gig at Rebel's Saloon. I think this is the best business move we've ever made." "I'm glad." When they got upstairs, they saw Brittany and Matt kissing, and Emily felt a tad bit better about her exchanged kisses in the truck with Chris. "Excuse me," she said when she got close enough. Brittany jerked back, looking a bit guilty. "We'll see you guys tomorrow," Emily said, taking Brittany's arm and pulling her inside. As soon as the door was closed, she looked at Brittany. "He seems pretty amazing." "Oh, he is. I can't wait until we have time to just talk about it." "I can't either." Emily yawned. "I haven't napped since I was at the rodeo this morning. Time for bed for me. This is going to be a long, hard week." "At least our only performance is over," Stephanie said from the couch. "Did you have a good time?" Emily walked to her sister and sat down. "Bed could wait for another minute or two." "It was wonderful. There's something about Chris that just makes my heart beat faster." "What about you? Did you have a good night?" "Yeah, it was great," Stephanie said brightly. "I wrote the lyrics for a couple more songs. I think they're really good." Awesome. Okay, I really am going to bed now. I'm exhausted from being out in the heat all day. We need to take a fan tomorrow. We have that plug behind the table. Good idea. Stephanie hurried to get a fan. I'll put it beside the door so we don't forget it. Brittany was still standing across the room, leaning against the front door. I think we're going to sell out of CDs. It's hard to believe since we thought 1,000 would be too many. Emily grinned. It was our performance. I think we did better than we've ever done. I know we did. Stephanie came back into the room. Even I felt like we were on fire. It was surprising, since it was always Stephanie who critiqued each performance. Brittany grinned at Stephanie. I think you're right. That crowd reacted in a way we've never seen before. I wish someone would have videoed us. Emily pulled her phone out. I bet there's a video of it on YouTube. There always is. She did some quick tapping and found what she was looking for. Yup. They divided it into songs. Here's Cowgirl. The three of them crowded around Emily's phone, watching themselves on the stage in the rodeo arena. Even Stephanie's innate shyness didn't come through the way it usually did. They did their dance steps in unison, all of them singing their hearts out. Even Stephanie, who couldn't stand to see herself on video, had a huge grin on her face when the song was over and the video was done. We were amazing. Emily nodded emphatically. No wonder we have crowds waiting to buy our CDs. This is incredible. Brittany shook her head. I didn't know we had it in us. Even my banjo solo was good. Brittany was always the worst critic of the musical aspects of their show. I can't believe we did that well in front of all of those people. Emily smiled. I think the crowd fed us. They would cheer, and we would do even better. This really was the best decision we could have made. We are on our way. Stephanie frowned. Unless you two marry your cowboys and ignore me at our act. Never, Emily said emphatically. We were sisters first. If we were guys, I'd be saying something like brothers before hoes or pals before gals. They all laughed, and Emily got to her feet. Bed for me. And don't you worry, Steph. We're a team. We always have been, and we always will be. As usual, Emily was asleep as soon as her head hit the pillow, and she was dreaming. For once it wasn't about being a country music star. No, she was dreaming about being Chris's wife. Asterisk. Sunday was the last day of the rodeo, and the girls collected their earnings. They had run out of CDs about an hour before the vendors had to be shut down, and they called that a win. I'll order more before we perform at Rebel's Saloon on Saturday, Emily said. And I do think we should design a t-shirt for things like this. We'd make a whole lot more if we had them to sell and weren't leaving their sales up to a small percentage from Cafe Press. They were driving home, and they were talking about what things they'd done wrong and right throughout the week. I agree, Stephanie said. I'm going to ask my friend Leslie to create a logo for us as well as t-shirts. We'll get some inventory and sell them from our website as well as at live concerts. They'd talked about doing so many things for marketing, but they hadn't had the funds before now. This time, they had the cash in hand. Sounds good, Brittany said. I'm almost sad it's all over. It was a lot of work, and it was hot, but we made so many new fans and got to interact with them. I thought the whole experience was absolutely amazing. And we've got 6 shows at bigger venues booked in the next month, Emily said, grinning at the others. We're getting somewhere, and it was all because of that silly rodeo. And she'd met Chris. She didn't add that, because she didn't want Stephanie to feel badly, but Chris was changing her entire world. Our Instagram has exploded since this rodeo. We've tripled our number of followers in just a week, Brittany said, because she was the official Instagram girl. Emily took care of Twitter and Facebook. Same with the other social media, Emily said. I don't think there's anything we could have done that would have done more for our career. What about Rebel Saloon? Stephanie asked. Oh, that's part of the deal, but Rebels is going to be amazing for us. I can feel it. Emily rubbed the back of her neck. We're going to have to rehearse hard this week. I have a party to go to Friday night, and I won't be able to work with you then. A party? Brittany asked, and Emily knew exactly what she was thinking. If one of them was invited to a party, it was usually all three of them. Yeah, Chris's mother is having a significant birthday. I'm guessing 50th based on his age, but he wouldn't confirm or deny. Anyway, I'm going to be his date for the party. I work from 10 to 5 that day, so he's going to pick me up at 6. No time for rehearsals at all. You're meeting his mother? Brittany asked. Really? Yeah. I'm a little nervous about it, but I agreed. Stephanie, do you still have a little black cocktail dress? Yes, of course. Do you want to borrow it? Yes, please. One of the benefits of being identical triplets is we get triple the wardrobes. Brittany laughed, pushing her glasses up on her nose. We do, except for costumes, because we dress alike. She sighed. I hate dressing alike for concerts, you know. We know, the other two chorused. Emily laughed. You know why we do it? It's our gimmick, and it really does work for us. I feel like half the people who are obsessed with us are only interested because we're triplets. Probably, Stephanie said. It's our thing, and we can't change now. And if we get married, we're going to have to coordinate our pregnancies. It wouldn't be right for one of us to be 5 months while another was 9 and the other wasn't pregnant yet. People would know who was who. Emily had often joked that they would have to always weigh exactly the same amount as well. I need to find a man, then, Stephanie said. It feels weird that you two are dating and I'm not. Maybe one of your guys has an identical twin. Have you asked? Emily shook her head. Chris is an only child. Matt's only brother died in a car wreck, and he's raising his niece now, so there's a no from me. Brittany shrugged. Sorry, but you're going to have to find someone who's not related to our guys. Have you met his niece yet? Stephanie asked. Sure did. I like her, but I'm not sure she likes me. Everyone likes you, Emily said, and she wasn't just trying to make her sister feel better. Everyone did like Brittany. Don't worry about it. We'll work through it, Brittany said. Well, I'm worried about meeting his mom on Friday. I've never met a boyfriend's mother before. And is he really a boyfriend? That feels so high school. When they were finally home, the three of them counted the money they'd made from their CD sales, in cash and from their app that they'd used for credit card sales. I had no idea we'd made so much, Stephanie said, her eyes wide. Well, remember, we paid for the CDs, so that much needs to be taken out, and there was a rush order, Emily shrugged. We still made a good amount, though. And we should make a decent amount again on Saturday night, Brittany said, shaking her head. I'm actually more excited about Rebel's Saloon than I was about the rodeo. I think people will be going to Rebels because they saw us on YouTube or because they heard us at the rodeo. If we have our t-shirts by then, I bet we can sell them. I'm not sure if Rebels will let us do that, but I have a call with the manager tomorrow, and I'll find out for sure, Emily said, grinning. I can't believe that one performance feels like it's changing our lives so much. I know. Brittany grinned. It's a little scary, isn't it? I mean, we've dreamed of this for so long, and now that it's finally happening for us, I'm not sure what to do. Stephanie shrugged. At least you're comfortable in front of people. Emily looked at Stephanie, shaking her head. I think we need to watch the YouTube video of our performance again, Steph. You were every bit as comfortable as Britt and me. I've never seen you that way. Maybe you need a bigger crowd to feel comfortable. Is it possible that the audience in a bar is just too close? I guess that's possible, but what does that mean for rebels? We've been to concerts there. They have a real stage. We'll be off to the side of the room, and no one will be able to reach us. That's true, Stephanie shrugged. I think I'll be fine. I hope so anyway. Emily pulled out her planner. So what days are we going to rehearse this week? We need to let the band know when they're needed. Brittany and Stephanie both pulled out their planners. I have deadlines on Wednesday and Friday. I probably need to work about 3 hours a day all week, and you know I can easily work around you guys, Stephanie told them. Since I have a lighter teaching schedule during the summer, I put all my students on Wednesday. I'm available any other day or night. Emily looked at her own work schedule. I'm Monday evening, Wednesday during the day, and Friday from 10 to 5. So let's book the band for Tuesday evening, Wednesday evening, and Thursday evening? Brittany asked. I can call them in the morning. The other two nodded. That's perfect, Stephanie said. And don't forget to let them know about Rebels on Saturday. Emily grinned at her sisters. Our lives are changing. Finally. Chapter 7. On Friday night, Emily left work quickly, rushing home as quickly as she could. She had one of the cars that day, only so she could get home fast. The three of them shared 2 cars, so they could cut down on expenses. By 6, she was dressed in Stephanie's dress and a pair of Brittany's heels and had her hair on top of her head in a pretty updo. She paced nervously as she waited for the knock that would mean Chris was there to pick her up. Why was this so nerve-wracking when she could get up on stage in front of thousands? She heard the knock and grabbed her purse, another thing she'd borrowed from Stephanie, and hurried to the door. When she opened it, she stared in shock for a moment. Never having seen Chris dressed up before, her stomach began fluttering immediately. He was as sexy in a suit as he was in a pair of Wranglers. Are you ready? He asked, his eyes lighting up as he looked at her from head to toe. He'd seen her dressed up for a concert she was in, but this knocked his socks off. She nodded. I think so. Do I look all right? She was worried she was going to stick out at the party like a sore thumb. You look absolutely amazing. He turned and led her toward his truck, wondering if she was going to be able to climb up in her tight skirt. Instead of waiting to find out, he caught her by the waist and lifted her into the truck, leaning in to kiss her when she was settled. I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to keep my hands off you with my mother watching all night. Well, you're going to have to. There was something about this man that made her want to touch him all the time, too. When he'd run around the truck and gotten in, she asked, "What will the party be like?" He shrugged. It's going to be people carrying trays of tiny little snacks that won't feed a fly and lots of people wearing uncomfortable clothes. Music in the background. I might be able to find a way to dance with you. She grinned. I like that idea. Tell me about your mom. She's a mom. She never worked and was always home when I got off school, usually waiting with cookies or some kind of snack. She never helped me with my homework, but she made sure I had a tutor if there was a problem. She sounds like a good mother. She was. She was always sad that she couldn't have another child after me. They tried and tried. I think she really wanted a daughter. Did she make you feel unwanted? Never. I was her whole world. I felt some guilt when Dad died, and I wasn't really around the last couple years of his life, but it wasn't because of anything she said. And now she's hounding me to marry and have kids. She said she needs to be a grandmother while she's still young enough to enjoy it. Emily grinned. Sounds like my mom, to be honest. She thinks at least one of us should be married by now. We keep telling her we're married to our work, but that doesn't seem to go over very well. Would you be opposed to marriage at this point in your life? Emily shook her head. I don't think so, as long as whomever I married understood that my career needed to come first. I've made a commitment to my sisters. And if you had kids? I'd keep performing. I would hope having a husband would help me raise the kids right. And as of this moment, I wouldn't be gone from my career all that much. Hopefully that will change soon, but it wouldn't even be as many hours as your regular working mom. I can do most of my marketing and networking from home. I think that makes a lot of sense. When my mom asks you that, answer it just the same way. Emily frowned. Is she going to be asking me personal questions like that? Chris nodded. I've never taken a girl home to meet my mom before, so I can only guess she will. You've never taken a girl to meet your parents? She was shocked. He seemed like the kind of man who would always having a woman hanging on his arm. Why wouldn't he have introduced any of them to his mother? He shrugged. After high school, I immediately started on the rodeo circuit. I was riding some while I was still in high school. When you're only home a couple of months every year, you don't really try to start a relationship. And then when I got home, I was working 70-hour weeks. How did I have time to meet someone? Aren't you still working 70-hour weeks? She asked. Sure. But I met you, and I'm not about to let you go, he said, without even glancing in her direction. She had to know she already meant a great deal to him, didn't she? Emily wasn't certain how to respond to that. Finally, after a minute, she asked, Does that mean I don't have a say in the matter? He grinned. Well, I guess you have a little bit of a say, but I can't let you say too much. You'll think you have the right to stop dating me or something. She shook her head as they pulled into a long winding driveway with a sign that proclaimed the place, Jackson Ranch. She was more nervous than she could express, even more so than she had been before he'd picked her up, because then she hadn't known that he didn't take women home to his mother often. She took a deep breath, pulling her visor down to check her makeup in the mirror. She wasn't usually one to worry about makeup or hair when she wasn't on stage, but meeting his mother for the first time, she needed to make sure she was put together. Adding a touch of lipstick, Emily said, I think I'm as ready as I'll ever be. I promise you, my mother isn't a dragon, and she's going to be the center of attention. She won't have much time to talk to you anyway. Chris reached out and put his hand on her arm, trying to calm her. Emily nodded. Let's do it. When they got inside, she was amazed at the beautiful home he'd grown up in. She felt like a pauper in comparison, although she'd had a solid, upper-middle-class upbringing. When they got to his mother, he introduced them politely. Mom, this is Emily Kelly. Emily, this is my mother, Audra Jackson. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Jackson. I've heard a lot about you. Audra looked her up and down. And I haven't heard nearly enough about you. What do you do for a living? I sell cowboy boots, she said honestly. I'm also trying to make a name for myself in country music. I see. Where have you performed? My sisters and I were the opening act for the rodeo last week, Emily told her. And we're playing at Rebel's Saloon tomorrow night. She was so happy to be able to mention those two things. If she'd been asked the same question 3 months ago, there wouldn't have been a good answer. You are? Audra looked impressed. I need to hear some of your music, then. You will, Chris said with a grin. We'll leave you to your guests. I'd like you to bring her back. Perhaps on Sunday night for supper? It would be nice to have time to get to know your young lady one-on-one. Chris looked at Emily, who thought about when her next shift was at the Western store. Finally she nodded. I'm free on Sunday night. As they walked away from his mother, Emily all but sagged against him. You said she wasn't a dragon. Well, she didn't once breathe fire, did she? Emily grinned. I feel a little singed. He laughed. Well, you're not. I honestly don't have a lot of friends here tonight. This is all about Mom, so the friends are hers. Would you like to walk through the garden with me? I think you'll find it's pretty. Mom likes to dig in the dirt herself, much to the dismay of the gardener. They had a gardener. And there were servants everywhere. Do you always have this many people working in the house? She asked, glancing around her. No. We have a housekeeper who lives in, but she's the only regular employee inside the house. We have several ranch hands, and Mrs. Grant's husband does the gardening. Mrs. Grant is our housekeeper. Well, that's good at least. Emily grinned at him, thankful he wasn't as wealthy as she'd thought for a moment. She wasn't sure how she would have fit into his world if he was. Let's walk in the garden, then. As they walked through the immaculately kept garden, she realized more and more the wealth Chris had at his disposal. It made her uncomfortable in a way it probably shouldn't have. Don't let my mother scare you, he said. She's just a mom who wants what's best for her son. I can see that. Emily spotted a bench and gratefully sank onto it. She wasn't used to heels like she was wearing. I feel very out of my league here. Don't. If I'm impressed by you, then it doesn't matter what my mother thinks. She smiled at that. It probably does to your mother. He chuckled. Well, sure, but not to me. He looked around him, pointing out different aspects of the garden. My mother planted that tree the year I was born. Really? And look at how tall it is. You must be old. He grinned at her, shaking his head. Not that old. I figured you brought me out here to steal a kiss, and here I sit, kissless. Is kissless a word? It is now. She shook her head. As an upcoming mover and shaker in the country music industry, I plan to coin a lot of new words and have them added to the dictionary. My favorite writer is trying to get the word bobalicious into the dictionary, but I just don't think it's catching on. Well, I wish you luck with that, then. With those words, he lowered his head and kissed her, pulling her tightly against him. He wanted to ask her to stay, but he knew it was too early in their relationship for her. Her arms wrapped around him, and she pressed herself against him, wishing they had a more private place. She didn't want it to get back to his mother that they were kissing in the garden, but she really did want to kiss him in the garden. It was hard to know what she should and shouldn't do. When he finally lifted his head, he looked deeply into her eyes. Why do I feel more with kisses from you than I ever have from a lot more with other women? She grinned. No idea, but I feel more with you than I have with anyone else. She looked around her. I feel like someone could walk up on us at any time. He groaned. It's definitely possible. The party is inside and out, but I think most people will choose to stay in where the air conditioning is going strong. They are smart people, she said with a grin. She could feel the sweat forming on her legs. We should probably go in where it's cool, too. If we must. She rested her head on his shoulder for a moment. As the host of the party, you should be where the people are. I should. He got to his feet and held his hand down for hers. When they got back inside, his mother frowned at him. You missed me opening my gifts. Sorry, Mom. I was showing her the tree you planted when I was born. Audra held up the CD he'd given her. I see this is autographed. I'd like to hear it. Would anyone object to some country music? When there was no response, she handed the CD to Chris. Emily took a deep breath. It felt strange for his mother to be listening to her sing for the first time in front of her. Chris put the CD into their CD player and pressed play. It took a moment, but then Emily's voice came blaring through the speakers. Audra's eyes met Emily's as the music played, and Emily waited for the other woman's reaction. The first song was Cowgirl, written about what it's like to sit quietly and wait for your cowboy to come find you, your cowboy being the one man in the world who was perfect for you. Chris stood beside Emily, his arm around her shoulders as they all listened to that first song. When it was over, he looked at his mother. "Would you like me to stop it?" "Let's listen to one more," she said. The first song was heart-wrenching and sad. The second was Lipstick on My Jeans, which was upbeat and funny. Emily listened with a critical ear as she did every time she heard it. She wondered how his mother would react, but she had to be proud of it no matter what. The song was fun, and it made her feel like dancing. At the end of the second song, Chris shut off the music and looked at his mother, knowing she would have something to say about it. "Who writes your music?" she asked Emily, and then every eye in the room turned to Chris and his date. "My sisters. One writes the lyrics, and the other writes the music. I tweak it all when it's done, but I'm not part of the initial creative process." "But you are one of the singers?" Audra asked. "I'm the lead singer," Emily responded. "My two sisters sing back up, and one of them plays different instruments in the background. She plays anything she picks up by ear the first time." "That's amazing." Audra smiled. "I loved both songs, but they were both so different. The second one was very funny, while the first was heart-wrenching." "Why did someone write about lipstick on jeans?" Emily laughed softly. "My sister had lipstick in her pocket at a football game. When the lipstick melted all over her, she was mortified, but we all saw it as a potential song. It was a brilliant move. Always turn your trials into music. It will work well for you." With those words, Audra turned to someone else and continued a conversation. Emily looked at Chris, and he nodded. She was sure that meant he thought she had his mother's approval. Chapter 8. On the drive home, Chris looked over at Emily. "I think it went really well. We'll know for sure when you come to dinner on Sunday night. I'll pick you up at 5. You don't work Sunday?" "No, not Sunday. I try to keep weekends off. I do a lot of prep then, and we practice on the weekends. Neither of my sisters work weekends, so it works out well." "Are you nervous about tomorrow night?" he asked. "I was more nervous about meeting your mother tonight. I'm excited about tomorrow night. Stephanie's nervous, but she always is. I plan to be there tomorrow night, and I think Matt will, too." Emily smiled. "One of you needs to bring a friend for Stephanie. She feels all left out and stuff." He made a face, thinking about it. "I'll go over my options and see if I can find a friend who wants to date a beautiful, talented woman. It's so hard to find people willing to do that. I hope people don't yell at you for asking them." Emily sat back, relaxing for the first time all day. "I'm so glad meeting your mother is over." He laughed. "It wasn't meant to torture you." "I know, it was just odd." When he parked in front of her apartment, he took her hand in his. "I've already got tickets for tomorrow night, and I'm going to show up as early as I can so I can sit in front." She nodded. "It will be nice to see a friendly face in the audience." Unbuckling her seat belt, she scooted toward him. Every other man she'd dated, she'd kind of dreaded the end of the night, when she knew he'd want to kiss her goodnight. It was so different with Chris. She wrapped her arms around him and kissed him, feeling safe and secure in his arms. She was sure she could go through a hurricane with him beside her and never once flinch. That was the power of his embrace. He walked her up to the apartment and held her close once more. "Do you want to come in?" she asked. He frowned for a moment before shaking his head. "Not a good idea. I think you need to have all your wits around you tomorrow when you conquer the Houston country music scene." "You're probably right. I'm just never ready to let you go at the end of the night." He smiled, his hand cupping her cheek. "I'm never ready to let you go either. But that's why we need to." "That doesn't make sense to me." He laughed. "If you lived alone, I don't think I'd be able to resist going in with you. With your sisters in there, I don't think it's a good idea at all. I'm still not sure what to make of Stephanie." "Oh, she's just shy. She likes you a lot. Really? How can you tell? He asked. She told me. She kissed him goodbye once more. I'll see you there tomorrow evening. Asterisk. When the three sisters arrived with their band at Rebel's Saloon the following evening, they were greeted by the manager, who showed them where to set up. There was a small backstage area where they could dress, and they all put on their skirts and cowboy boots they wore for their performances. Together they sang in the backstage area, warming up their voices for the performance of their lives. They had a new song that had been written during the rodeo. They were trying it out on the crowd for the first time. As usual, they planned to do a few of their own songs, but still mostly covers of other people's. At a concert like that, people wanted to be able to sing along. Once they were on stage for their first set, the crowd was energetic and happy to listen, but it was obvious no one really knew their original songs. They only knew the cover songs they did. Emily was a little worried that the CDs they'd brought to sell wouldn't go, but the store in the saloon was handling them. They had also managed to have t-shirts made, and they all prayed they'd be a hit. They needed the money to come back to them after spending so much. When it was time for their first break, the three sisters went out to sit with Chris and Matt. Chris had brought a friend named Joe, who looked at Stephanie like she was a giant ice cream cone, and he had just come in from the heat of a Texas summer day. Stephanie was very wary of him, but so were both of her sisters. Emily leaned close to Chris. "Where'd you find that guy?" "He works for me. Seemed like a good guy, so I asked him if he wanted to go on a blind date." "He will not be asked again." Chris was watching him as closely as Emily and Brittany were. "Are you going to be starving after performing tonight?" Emily nodded emphatically. "Always. There's a restaurant here in the building, and they're bringing us all burgers that we can eat backstage, but I'm going to still be hungry. I don't know why I get so hungry after performances, and my sisters get so creative. I'm definitely wired differently than they are. We'll find some food when you're done, then." The first set was great. By the third chorus of Lipstick on My Jeans, the whole audience was singing along. "And I love the new rodeo song." "What are you calling it?" "Our working title is Rodeo Cowboy, but we're not sure if we're going to keep that one." "I like it, though. The beat is good." "It is. I'm thinking I will pick you up at 5 tomorrow. Does that work?" Emily took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm not sure if I want to spend a whole evening with your mother without other people around to distract her. That will make it harder. You're going to do just fine." He reached out and covered his hand with hers. Emily looked over to see Stephanie slowly backing her chair away from Joe. She frowned and looked at Chris. "I'm going to go backstage with Stephanie to get her away from him. Tell him he's being a jerk, would you?" Chris nodded, and Emily got up. "Stephanie, I need your help with something backstage." "It was nice meeting you, Joe." Stephanie immediately jumped to her feet, following her sister. "He's awful." "I know, and so does Chris. He's going to tell him he's being a jerk and hopefully also to get lost. I just got up so you wouldn't have to sit there with him any longer. You're my favorite sister in this room." Emily smiled. "I'd better be." They sat down and retouched their makeup, knowing they only had another 20 minutes until the next set. Both of them looked at each other critically, looking for anything that needed to be fixed. All of them wore their hair in a single braid down their back for their performances. "I need to redo your braid," Stephanie said. "Some of the hair is flying out." "Thanks." Emily had always had trouble keeping her hair in braids, but her sisters stayed perfectly. Since they had the same type of hair, it was odd to her, but it was also normal that it would need to be fixed. 10 minutes before they were supposed to go on, Brittany joined them in the back. "I'm sorry. I should have come sooner." Chris sent Joe away. "Sorry that didn't work out better, Steph." Not your fault, Stephanie said, not looking up from Emily's hair. Do you have some hairspray? I forgot mine, and Emily's hair is working on escaping from its braid as usual. Yeah, in my bag. Brittany rushed over and got her hairspray, taking it back to Stephanie. Then she sat down before the mirror and touched up her makeup. Chris really liked the new song you two wrote about the rodeo. I think the crowd reacted well to it. And everyone was singing along with Lipstick on My Jeans by the third chorus, Brittany said. I bet we sell some of those CDs. I sure hope so. Most of our profit from the rodeo show went into the CDs and the t-shirts for this. I'm hoping we move a lot of them, Emily said. Well, I think if we keep knocking their socks off with our performances, we'll sell a lot. Brittany jumped to her feet. We only have 3 more minutes. You two ready? Stephanie nodded, spraying Emily's hair. Yup. Let's do it. Asterisk. After the last set, the 3 sisters went home together. Emily had been regularly fed throughout the evening, so she didn't have the huge hunger she usually did after a show. They chattered the entire way home, excited about how well it had gone. They were just reaching the Woodlands when Emily's phone rang, and she reached for it. With as late as it was, she was surprised anyone would call. Glancing at the screen, she saw it was local, but she didn't recognize the number. Hello? This is Jack Welling. I'm calling from Rebel's Saloon. I wanted to let you know about your t-shirt sales and CD sales. Emily's eyes widened. She hadn't expected this call for a few days. Oh, wonderful. How'd they do? They're gone. Everything you brought in has sold. We want to have you back. I want to schedule a date when the 3 of you can come and we can do the right amount of publicity, not just when you'll be substituting for someone else, though we'd like permission to contact you if we do need someone else to sub in for a band. We'd be happy to do both. I can't guarantee that we'd be able to sub often with our schedules, but we'd always be willing to try. Emily glanced toward the front seat. Brittany was completely turned around listening, and she met Stephanie's eyes in the rearview mirror. Great. We'll mail you a check on Monday for tonight's performance with half the gate and the amount for your shirts and CDs. You ladies are going places. I'll look forward to hearing from you again. And the check. She'd really look forward to that check. The place had been packed. Sounds good. With that, he ended the call, and Emily sat in stunned silence for a moment. What? Brittany said, her voice a half squeal. It was obvious to all 3 of them something momentous had just happened. Emily took a deep breath and explained about the shirts and CDs, and more importantly, they want to put us on their schedule where they can do the right amount of publicity and everything. So they want us to do a regular Rebel's Saloon show and want to be able to call us if they need a substitute band again. She sat quietly, waiting for the words to sink in for her sisters. They're going to publicize our performance at Rebel's Saloon, like they would for a big-name country band? Stephanie asked. Our songs will be sung there again, and people will be able to sing along next time, because they'll know who we are? Stephanie let out a scream, voicing what all of them had been thinking. The other 2 just laughed. Emily had been known to scream. Brittany did it all the time. But Stephanie? They really were on their way. We need to celebrate when the check comes in, Brittany said softly. We need to do something momentous and special. Like buy new costumes? Stephanie asked. No, like, take a week to go on a vacation, just the 3 of us. I have a feeling there won't be many more times when we can do something like that. And I don't mean Galveston, because it's too close. Maybe South Padre or something. Brittany shrugged. Something. Emily thought about it for a moment before nodding. I agree. We need to do something. Our lives are about to change forever. She was glad Stephanie didn't realize she didn't just mean their newfound popularity, but she knew that Brittany would understand completely. We need to commemorate this the best way we know how. Sitting back, Emily rested her head against the back seat. She couldn't wait to tell Chris what she'd just heard, and she realized she had wanted to tell him first. Before her sisters. That meant he was even more important to her than she'd realized. Dinner the following night, with just his mother and him, was going to be major. She just hoped she passed the test. Whatever test it may be. When they got home, the other two worked on a new song while Emily raided the fridge and thought about everything going on. She sat and listened to the other two, nodding when she liked something as she munched on her huge sandwich. She received a text from Chris shortly after, and it was short and sweet. "I'll pick you up at 5. Concert was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." Her text back was light-hearted, but she had to force herself not to add "love you" to the end. She really did love him. She was about to take off in her career, something she'd worked toward for years, and she was in love for the first time in her life. Why did they have to happen at the same time? She wasn't sure how long she could ask him to wait for a real commitment. Chapter 9. After a long day of rehearsal, Emily changed for dinner with Chris and his mother. She wasn't sure what was appropriate to wear, so she went with a pair of black slacks and a nice pink blouse. Saying a quick prayer that his mother would be happy with her, she went into the living room, where Brittany was sitting on the couch, her head on the back, her feet tapping to the music she had going with earbuds. Stephanie was at her computer, trying to get ahead on her work for the week. They didn't know how much longer they would all need to be working their day jobs, but hopefully it was almost a thing of the past. Brittany glanced up at her and nodded. "You look good. You nervous? Does it show?" Emily asked. Stephanie turned around and looked at her. "That color looks good on us." Emily grinned. She loved how she and Stephanie had always embraced their sameness, while Brittany had worked so hard to look different. "Thank you." She sat down beside Brittany on the couch and sighed. "I'm not nervous. I'm absolutely freaked out." "I don't blame you," Brittany said, shaking her head. "I'm not sure how you managed to meet her once. She sounds scary to me." Emily shrugged. "She wasn't terrible, but there were people everywhere. I'm afraid I'm going to get the 3rd degree when it's just the 3 of us, and I think I'll be found lacking." "You're going to do great," Stephanie said. "You're brilliant, competent, and you can dance." What else is she looking for in the mother of her future grandchildren? That's part of my problem. I'm not sure I'm ready to be the mother of anyone's grandchildren. Our career is just starting to take off. What would marriage and babies do to it? "You need to stop worrying about that, Brittany said. "I think you take one day at a time. Maybe he's the kind of guy who wants a 2-year engagement." Emily laughed. "Because he waited a whole 2 years before taking me to meet his mother." That makes so much sense. You don't have to have babies right away either. You could wait and have them in a couple of years when you're ready. I thought of that. I'm not sure that Mrs. Jackson is ready to wait 2 years, though. I'm probably borrowing trouble, but I feel like Chris is on the fast track and I want to put on the brakes, even as I want to hold on and say, let's go. Does that make sense? Perfect sense to me, Brittany said. And me. Stephanie frowned at her. I feel like I should come up with a good Cyrano quote here to make you feel better. And is there one? Not for this. I'll think about it, though. Stephanie walked to the couch and sat on the other side of Emily. Just remember, we're sisters, but we're not Siamese triplets. We're our own people. If you want to marry, you can do that. I'm sure I'm jumping the gun by even worrying about it. Don't mind me. I'm overthinking things. I should just take a nap, and then I'll feel better. Brittany laughed. Naps are your answer to everything. Yes, they are. So I should nap. A knock sounded at the door then, and Stephanie jumped up. Hi, Chris. She's ready. Chris stepped into the apartment and looked over at Emily. Brittany was wearing her glasses, but it was now easy for him to tell the three sisters apart anyway. His eyes zeroed in on Emily. You look good. Emily got to her feet. I was just saying I needed a nap. Maybe we should do this next week. He laughed. You're going to do fine. Are you sure? With a wave to her sisters, Emily grabbed her purse and left with him, more nervous now than she had been, though she wasn't sure why. As soon as they were in his truck, Chris leaned over and kissed her. I needed that. You know, I think I did, too. I was getting really nervous. Why? You've met her already. I'm afraid she's going to ask questions I won't be able to answer. She might. That's what she does, but we'll answer them together, and all will be fine. Chris pulled out of the parking lot and onto the main street. My mother's approval is not necessary for our relationship to work. It's not? Nope. It's not even necessary for me to smile at you. That's good. I'm not sure what I'd do without your smile at this point. She grinned at him. So what are we having for supper? Chicken fried steak. Mom wanted to cook, and it's one of the few things she actually enjoys cooking. It was my dad's favorite meal, which makes it special to her. Did she cook on Friday? She asked. Are you kidding? That thing was catered. That's where all of the wait staff came from. We really only do have one employee. Well, that's good. I couldn't imagine your mother standing in the kitchen with servants all around her, ordering them around. I didn't want to imagine it anyway. Mom is pretty normal and down to earth. She wants me to marry for grandkids, and that seems to be the driving force in her life, but it's not really up to her, now is it? Emily bit her lip. And what do you want? He shrugged. I'd like kids. I always figured I'd have a house full of them. Is that what you want? Someday maybe. I got a call after we left the saloon last night, telling us we'd sold out of CDs and t-shirts. They want us to come back as a regular act, not just as a fill-in. You know, where they could advertise us and make people know that we're out there. That's wonderful. But, what does that have to do with kids? I've worked my entire adult life toward one goal, and it feels as if it's in my grasp. I can't give up my dreams and settle down to have babies right away. He frowned at her as he stopped at a traffic light. Are you breaking up with me? 'Cause it kind of sounds like it. No, of course not. I want you in my life as much as I want my career, which is what's so confusing. I can't let my sisters down either. Do you have any idea how many years we've worked toward this one goal? He sighed. I guess I never really thought of that. You might want to. The closer I get to you, the closer I want to get to you. But that gets me. He rubbed the back of his neck. Well, stop worrying about it all for now. We're just going to have a nice, friendly dinner with my mother. Which brings me back to why I was nervous in the first place. Your mother. He laughed. Stop. We'll handle it. I hope so. She stared out the passenger window, a little sad. She'd wanted him to tell her that he loved her and couldn't imagine a life without her. To tell her that he'd wait until she was ready to have babies. But he didn't. He didn't seem to know what he wanted to do. When he finally pulled up in front of his mother's house, he turned to her. Stop worrying, we're going to have fun. She nodded. Now she was more uncertain of him than ever. She wished she'd never brought up her worries. Together, they went into the house, and his mother smiled at her. I've listened to the entire CD, and I really enjoyed it. You have an amazing talent. Thank you. My sisters and I love what we do. Emily grinned. We had a lot of fun playing at Rebel's Saloon last night, and they've asked us to come back when there's time for promotion. That's wonderful. I really do see you with a good, solid career in country music. I hope you're right. We've worked very hard for this. Well, I have supper ready. I hope you're hungry. Mrs. Jackson picked up a tray of chicken fried steaks to carry into the dining room. Is there anything I can do to help? Yes, would you carry a couple of the bowls into the dining room? I have the table set and everything in bowls. We just need to get it all in there to eat. Mrs. Jackson looked over her shoulder at Chris. There's sweet tea in the fridge. Get it and carry it in there. Chris reached for the tea, giving the two women a little space. He couldn't help but wonder if his mother wanted to talk privately with Emily, and if she did, what she'd say. He was very curious about how the evening would play out. Once they were all seated, Mrs. Jackson had Chris say a prayer, and they all reached for the food. Emily was hungry, as usual, and she didn't care if everyone knew it. His mother watched her eat with her usual gusto for a moment before saying, "You must exercise a lot if you eat like that normally." I do. Emily nodded. I need to, but food keeps me doing well when I've been on stage a lot. We dance a lot on stage, and I tend to choreograph the moves for us, so I practice without my sisters. Then we all go to the gym together at least 3 times per week. So you'll need to remember as you get older to keep up that kind of exercise or cut down on your food intake if you want to keep your slender figure. Thank you. I will. Emily had been criticized for the amount she ate for years, so it didn't bother her when his mother mentioned it. Did your mother have many children? Mrs. Jackson asked. Emily smiled. She only had one pregnancy, but when there were 3 of us, she decided she was done. She was afraid she'd get a bunch of babies at once again. And you? How many children do you want? Emily shrugged. I'd like a few, but I will need to wait a few years. Right now I've made a commitment to myself and to my sisters to give the band my all. Mrs. Jackson put down her fork, looking back and forth between Emily and Chris. And why are you still dating her, Christopher? He blinked a few times, staring at his mother in disbelief. You think I should stop dating her because she wants to wait a few years to have children? He'd been a little stunned when she'd said that in the truck, but hearing it come from his mother sounded ridiculous to him. Well, you're dating to find a suitable wife. A suitable wife is willing to have children. I am willing to have children, Mrs. Jackson. I'd like 3 or 4. I just don't want to have to put my career and my sister's lives on hold while I have them. I think it's smarter for me to wait until I am ready to have them than to have the children and resent them for disturbing my career. Mrs. Jackson shook her head. She's absolutely unsuitable, Christopher. Mom, I don't believe the choice is yours. I'm dating her. I get to decide if I want to agree to wait or move on to the next girl, who I won't care about half as much. Oh, don't be ridiculous. She is just a girl. Find another. His mother shrugged and picked up her fork, continuing her meal as if she hadn't just said something ridiculous. Chris frowned. She's special. And I won't find another just because you want me to. He considered for a moment ignoring the romantic proposal he'd been planning and dropping to one knee right there, but he didn't want to propose in front of his mother. Especially with no ring. He had to wait for the ring. Brittany had agreed to go ring shopping with him while Emily worked the next day. She knew her sister's tastes, and he could use her finger for the appropriate size. Emily tucked her head, fighting the tears that were forming. This was what she'd been expecting. He said he wouldn't dump her for it, but she was sure he would. His mother's opinions were obviously important to him. She ignored everything that was said until the end of the meal. When her help with dishes was refused, she looked at Chris. "I think maybe you should take me home now." Emily knew with everything inside her, it was going to be their last night together. She wanted to spend as much time with him as possible. He nodded. "Let's go." He reached for her hand, trying to show her how he felt with the comfort of his touch. Once they were in the truck, he turned to her. "I'm sorry she was so rude about the children thing. If she'd even thought about it, she would have known that you wouldn't want children right away." Emily just shrugged. He frowned, putting the car into drive and heading to the highway that led to her home. "I'm sorry she hurt your feelings." "You didn't put the words into her mouth," she said softly. "You just believe her." He tried a few times to strike up another conversation with her, but it didn't work. She was absolutely heartbroken, whether she had a right to be or not. When he pulled up in front of her apartment, Emily unbuckled her seatbelt and slid across the seat toward him, pressing her lips to his. This kiss was for all the years they wouldn't have together. All of the time she would miss him. All of the children they would never have. She clung to him, afraid to let him go, but knowing it was time. Finally, she pulled away, looking deeply into his eyes. "Goodbye, Chris. There's no need to walk me to my door." She slid out of the truck and ran up to her apartment, shutting the door behind her. She could hear his feet pounding against the pavement as he chased her, but she locked the door when she heard him knock. Her sisters stared at her in shock as she let the tears she'd held in for the past hour and a half start to fall. She was alone from here on out. Maybe she could try her hand at writing a lonely girl song. A girl who had given up all hope of babies. She didn't say a word to her sisters as she went into her room and shut the door. She wanted no one. How could she? Her heart was broken. Chapter 10. Emily had to work the next day, but she did so with bloodshot eyes. She was sure her coworkers thought she'd spent some time drinking over the weekend, and she didn't argue with that. She went about her job the way she always did. Her third customer of the day was a handsome man, and she went through her usual spiel, helping him find the right boots. He kept looking at her strangely. Finally, he asked, "Are you one of the Kelly sisters?" "Yes, I am." She didn't recognize him, but she was getting a little more known around town now. "I watched you at Rebel's Saloon on Saturday night." "You're amazing." "Thank you." Emily smiled, and she knew it was a pathetic smile. She didn't seem to have any smiles inside her that day. "Which sister are you? The one who plays instruments, the one who writes lyrics, or the lead?" "I'm the lead singer, Emily." As much as she loved talking about singing, it was all she could do to keep her voice peppy with him. She just wanted to go home and cry a little more. "Well, I bought one of your CDs. I think the three of you are amazing. Thanks for sharing your talent with the rest of the world." He frowned and looked around him. "Why are you working in a Western store? That makes no sense to me." That brought a true smile to Emily's lips. "My sisters and I have each had a day job for the past 3 years as we work to support our music habit. I have a feeling we'll be able to leave them behind soon, but right now we're playing it safe. You should have the lyric writing sister write something about that." "Think she would?" he asked. "She'll write about anything, as you could see with lipstick on my jeans." He laughed. "I think that was my favorite of your original songs." Emily nodded. "It's everyone's favorite of our songs. Stephanie really knocked that one out of the park." She walked him to the register and checked him out, handing him his new boots and a bag. "You're all set." "Thank you. I can't believe I ran into you selling boots of all things." She just smiled, raising a hand in a wave. Her manager was behind her. "People are going to start wondering if you keep working here." Emily turned around and looked at him. "Why?" "Everyone has to do something while they're working to make it big. But you're becoming recognizable." A couple people have asked me why you're still working here. She shook her head, her eyes wide. We've really only done 2 big shows. We're not making nearly enough for us to start quitting our jobs. He nodded, slowly. All right. Just make sure you give me some notice when you're ready to leave. I will. I'm not the type to leave you high and dry. Emily glanced at the time on her phone. But I'm going to right now, because it's time for me to get off work. He smiled. Go home. Write another of your silly songs, would you? I don't write them. I just sing them. Why don't people believe that? She grabbed her purse from under the counter and walked toward the front door. As she stepped outside, she felt the wave of Texas heat rush over her. Ugh. I do not need hot. She got into her car and immediately lowered the windows, hoping some of the heat would seep out while she sat there for a minute, waiting for the AC to kick in. She was glad she was only a couple of blocks from home. She wasn't ready to fight traffic. As soon as she walked in the door, her sisters both looked at her as if they were worried she wasn't all right. I'm doing okay. I promise. She wasn't, but they didn't need to know that. I even wrote a really bad song on my lunch break. The other two looked at each other. Can we hear the lyrics of this horrible song? Stephanie asked. They all knew that any time Emily attempted to write anything, it was an absolute disaster. Oh sure. Let me get it. Emily hurried off into her room while her sisters waited. When she got back, she handed the paper to Stephanie. Stephanie read through it. Well, your eye for meter hasn't gotten any better, but I really think we could polish this and use it. Emily grabbed the paper from Stephanie. The song starts with "My heart's in tatters. I'll never have any babies." How on earth is that marketable? Trust me. I'm a professional. Stephanie took the paper back and handed it to Brittany. When Brittany read it, her eyes lit up. We really could use this. I'm sorry to try to capitalize on your pain, but I think we have a hit here. Top 40 on the country charts, guaranteed. Emily looked back and forth between her sisters. Are you two trying to make me feel better? Brittany shrugged. We want you to feel better, but we're not going to waste time polishing a song that will never make us money. You know that as well as we do. Emily sighed. I guess so. She stood and stretched. I think I'm going to the gym. I want to then go somewhere and eat myself into oblivion. But if I work off the calories first, then I can still feel good about myself. Brittany jumped to her feet. I'll go with you. I'll even watch you eat horrible things you shouldn't put into your body out of love and support for my baby sister. I'm going to change, then. Emily wore jeans and a Western shirt for work every day, and she knew it wasn't good for exercising. You coming with us, Steph? Stephanie shook her head. No, I'm going to stay here and play with your lyrics. I'm excited. Okay. Emily shook her head, having a really hard time believing they thought her drivel was worth saving. She'd never written anything worthwhile and had truly never wanted to. She changed into her shorts and a tank top to work out, coming out to see Brittany wearing something similar. We'll come back here and change before we go to dinner, and I'm paying tonight, Brittany said. I know you've had a tough couple of days, and I want to cheer you up. Emily felt tears pop into her eyes at that. I have the best sisters in the whole wide world. Brittany laughed. Well, I sure think so. Stephanie looked up. Group hug time? I think we can forego that just this once. Emily opened the door. Back in a bit to dress for supper. You should go to supper with us. Nah. I'm going to stay here and eat my ramen. I think I can be done with all my work for the week this evening, and then I can be freer for the rest of the week. Emily shrugged. If that's what you want. They went to the apartment gym, which wasn't as well equipped as one of the big health clubs in the area, but it was right there, and it was free. Free was the price they'd been looking for. Emily put her hair up in a ponytail and got onto the treadmill, setting it to a brisk walk to warm up before she started running. Brittany climbed on an elliptical. They were the only people there, so Brittany skipped her headphones and blared some music throughout the room. Soon, Emily was running, and it felt good. She didn't particularly like most types of exercise, but she loved to run. It made her feel powerful. And of course, she liked to dance, because she had to. Whenever she liked it or not, she had to do it, so she chose to like it. When she had run her 4 miles, she slowed the machine down and walked for a 5-minute cool down, and then she got off. She was still breathing a little heavy as she looked over at Brittany. "You done?" Brittany nodded. "I am. Let's go change." They went back to the apartment, and Emily put on a light summer dress. It was purple and sleeveless and made her feel pretty. She wasn't sure where Brittany was taking her, but this would work for McDonald's or for a dressy place. Brittany looked at her and smiled when she returned to the living room. "Let's get out of here." Emily nodded, tired but feeling a little less like a wreck emotionally. She would carry on with her life plan. She didn't need a man to complete her, and she never had. Brittany drove to the restaurant, and they both got out. Brittany kept glancing at the clock in the car. "Do you need to be somewhere else?" Emily finally asked, wondering what on earth was wrong with her sister. "No, sorry. Just a little jumpy." Brittany turned the music up louder, and Emily wondered if it was so she couldn't ask any more questions. They went to a restaurant Emily had never been to, but if Brittany liked it, she was willing to try. "We're meeting someone," Brittany said as they got to the hostess stand. "What do you mean?" Emily asked. "I thought it was just the 2 of us." She looked toward the seating area and spotted Chris sitting at a table, wearing a pair of slacks and a nice shirt. His cowboy hat was on an empty chair near him. "Emily, just listen to what he has to say," Brittany said softly, hugging her sister. "He'll bring you home." With that she turned and left. Emily thought for a moment about chasing her out to the car, but she knew she'd just look like an idiot if she did. Instead, she took a deep breath and walked over to the table where Chris was, sitting down. "Looks like you've been conspiring with my sisters." "I'm sorry. I didn't know how else to get you here." Chris reached out to take her hand, but she pulled it away, putting it on her lap. "I am sorry for the way my mother talked to you last night, but she said what she believes. She wasn't talking for both of us." Emily sighed. "I guess I knew that, but it still hurt. I know you don't want to wait for children. I could see it on your face on the way to the ranch. I don't want to hold you back from your dreams any more than I want you to hold me back from mine. But what if we waited to have kids? You're young. Say we talk about kids when you hit 30. It doesn't have to happen yesterday. I could make that compromise, and I would hope that you could compromise enough to marry me soon but still keep working with your sisters. I wouldn't begrudge you travel." She tilted her head to one side, considering what he'd said. "But what about your mother? She'll resent me forever. My mother has been told that she will treat you kindly and she will respect your wishes on this. I don't want to marry someone I don't love just so I can have children soon. I want to marry you." She blinked a couple of times. "We've only known each other for a few weeks. We can't already be talking about marriage. You know that's exactly what you were thinking and why you were planning to never see me again. You want to marry, too." She took a deep breath and nodded. "Maybe I do." He smiled, covering her hand with his. "Choose what you want, and think about it." Finally, she nodded. "I will." After their meal, he took her out to a car in the parking lot. "I didn't drive my truck, because I was afraid you'd recognize it and not come in. I brought my mother's car. She shook her head. You really did think this out. And both of your sisters helped me. Emily sighed. I have good sisters. That you do. He turned the AC on high before driving from the parking lot and heading north. Where are we going? Oh, we're just driving, he said, not looking toward her. Did you think about what I said? Are you willing to have a relationship with me? After a moment, Emily said. I think I am. I can't imagine a relationship with anyone else. I actually decided to never have children last night, because I would never want them with anyone but you. She knew she was being melodramatic, but sometimes it was just called for. I'm glad. Not that you decided not to have children, of course, because we're having babies. I'm glad you decided not to have them with anyone but me. Me too. She looked over at Chris, watching his profile as he drove. It was still light out, thanks to longer summer days, and she could see him perfectly. He could feel her gaze on him and reached out to her, twining his fingers through hers. Thanks for giving me another chance after my mother went psycho on you. She laughed. I guess I can't blame you for what your mother does. And I promise, she will never do that or anything like it again. Chris pulled off the road into a deserted area, and it took Emily a moment to realize they were back at the rodeo grounds. She could see the arena where many of the events had taken place off in the distance, but this area was just the parking area and where the vendors had been. He stopped the car and took off his dress shirt, revealing a white cotton undershirt. Sorry, it's too hot to go out there dressed up. I can see that. He grabbed his hat and plopped it on his head, getting out of the car and walking around to open her door for her. Holding hands, they walked toward the arena. Do you have a destination in mind? She finally asked. Almost there, he said. He took her to the spot where her table had been and stopped. This is where I first saw you, sitting behind your table selling CDs. Your face drew me to you, but when I heard your music I was hooked. She looked at him, her brow furrowed. I watched you walk away and really admired your butt after our short conversation. You really excited me when you bought those CDs. I didn't think we'd sell any, and you were the first person I talked to, and you bought 5. I was shocked. He grinned, turning to her and looking down into her eyes. Emily, I know we've only known one another for a couple of weeks, but I knew the moment I saw you that I wanted you to be mine. He dug in his pocket with a free hand and pulled out a ring box. Will you be my wife? Emily gasped and put her hand to her chest. She'd known this was coming eventually, but not tonight. You really don't mind that I'll be traveling a lot? And we can't have babies for 7 years or so? He shook his head. I really don't mind. As long as you're the woman in my life, we can wait as long as you need. Chris reached out and caressed her cheek. I need you in my life. Yes. I'll marry you, then. But I don't want a huge wedding. You may need to negotiate that with my mother, but I have no opinion. Chris grinned at her, slipping the ring onto her finger. Have I mentioned yet how very much I love you? Emily looked down at her ring for a moment before wrapping her arms around his neck. I love you right back, Chris Jackson. He leaned down and pressed a kiss against her lips. You're my whole world. And I'm going to do everything I can to help you be successful. Just keep loving me. I need nothing more than that.